Every beginning has many different ends. Oh, once upon a fair tale, in a kingdom where darkness started to reign, slowly, insidiously, the silvers of the streams and the gold glint of the warm kiss of the sun began to fade. And it was so slow, and the colour tones started to go into a sepia, that the folk that lived in this kingdom barely saw what was happening. All they understood was that they found it hard to lift their chin, that when they got out of bed in the morning, somehow their spine felt like it was a tree that was becoming drier and more brittle and unable to flex and bend like the great willow. Some even, because of a deep, gnarling, twisting, barbed kind of feeling, where they felt that there was almost like a cheese wire or a violin that was playing so badly, as if the devil himself were tormenting those so that they would bite and even explode into a juicy, gorgeous rage. That those who were shackled and chained and bound in the nether underworlds, for their sins they had fallen far from grace, because every time they had gone against the natural will of God in all his glory, however one may see him, the natural instinct and justice of the karmic law, every time there was that sense to maybe just cross over the line out of curiosity and go and have a look. Maybe I've been told not to do that because there is somebody who's keeping secrets to themselves which will make me feel powerful. Maybe, just maybe, I've been lied to, and if I do cross over and go and do those things, enjoy writhing around in that snake pit to feel the pleasure and to get the romantic erotica of the pains. Maybe, just maybe, if I roll around in the flesh and the joys and just feel turning and twisting like sun grand. Dance like at a masked ball, but for those who want to move into the more dark territory. Maybe that's where the power lies. Maybe that's where all of those who make all of the money, because it seems to be those who govern and rule, seem to be behind that curtain. But most of the townsfolk, they didn't think that way. They just felt that they weren't becoming barbed and gnarly. There were no thorny aspects to them. They weren't becoming brittle or being shackled and chained by their own flesh, the addictions of those experiences. They were good people. They had worked really hard and wanted the best for everybody else. They wanted to grow and build and make crafts and sell their wares and have great ideas and share it with the world and take all of their goodness in a cart, slowly, patiently, to set out their stalls just to make a modest income, to have a nice place with some flowers and maybe to grow a bit of food and to wave and cheer and enjoy music with everybody else in the town square. But even they had started to creak their necks to look at each other. They could barely raise the corners of their mouth for a smile. There was a grimace because they felt like there was something weighing down heavily on their backs. And what they did not know is that the king, who had recently been crowned only a few years ago, when his good mother, who was loved by all, had passed away, that he was a weak man. He had succumbed to so many chains and binds that there were so many that were pulling the straps tight. He couldn't do anything because of his transgressions, and everybody had hold of them, and they were pulling them so tight that he was bound and reined up and chained like a horse. And he was having to pull so many who owned him. And the shame of it, there was no mother to run to. He had his sons, but he feared deep down that maybe they would then be drawn and pulled into the mess because of his weaknesses. How were they going to redeem and come back? They were already owned in many ways. And the townsfolk felt it deeply. Because right behind the good king of the good lands that had brought so much to the world in all its glory was now being seen as a bad place, as the root of all evil. Because those who had come in to take over had had some envy and resentment. And now they were parading round the palace, and now they were parading round the domain, but hidden in the shadows and the wings. They saw it just like Toy Town. And all of that weight that was now falling down and cascading down like water down to the backs of the very people that were tending the soil and the earth. Some were strong, some knew and tried to smile and look to each other to say, when we all come and stand up and throw this from our backs, we just have to remember, find our legs and know deep down it's worth it. That when we do stand, like in the circus tents, when it's gymnast on top of shoulder, on top of shoulder, on top of shoulder, for the greatest human pyramid that ever was seen. To remember our resilience, our adaptability, to know that we believe in the eternal life, and to know this is not all. As it was in the beginning, and ever shall be, a world without end. And those people, the folk, the common folk on the ground, they remembered from their feet the new blades of grass, the daisies, the dandelions, the buttercups, just the simple wildness. And they knew with every petal and every breath and every flap of a wing of a butterfly or a bird, that the snakes that slithered around the corridors within the stone matrix, that the people realised that there was something almost like a gas that had been confusing them, that it was seeping out of the key main castle. And it was slowly, slowly putting the people to sleep and wearing them down. So they followed, and they found in a deep dungeon that there was a concoction, and a book of spells. And those spells had actually been written through to invert, turn their world upside down, to pitch neighbour against neighbour, to cause conflict, fear, but not fear that was obvious. No, these spells that have been concocted, that the smoke that was leaking out of this cauldron and through into the town, it was very insidious. It was the dropping of poison in the air and the leading of temptations and the trying to find the humble man or the humble woman, but to get them to self-examine. So they would be so busy examining themselves that they would fall into a sensuality and a physicality and into the soma, rather than being able to see with crystal clarity that it wasn't about them or their flesh, but it was about the purpose and what they did and the actions that they took. And praise be to God, to follow a higher mission. But deep down, there's a sense of wanting something external, to have a sense of pride, which is why there needs to be a purpose. And when the people saw that even humility in this spellbook, there had been deceptions of trying to drop in seeds of pride. Yes, we want others to be proud of us as we are innocent children. But this pride, it was different. It was more about seeing the self and watching the self and admiring the self, doing something to be able to see one doing it themselves. The constant crafting of making the people become so disassociated and outside of themselves, on the left, on the right, or all around it, they just couldn't walk forward down the narrow road. And it was so easy to be led into twisting, turning temptations that were spiralling off in all manner of directions. Oh, when the people saw this spell book, they found on the shelves tonics to reverse things. And they started to add grace, dignity, and all of those wonderful attributes that are more about connecting than being seen. Because for too long, nearly for 100 years, this kingdom had been working through almost holograms and lenses and mirrors, where it was a constant bouncing of the light, of catching oneself in reflections. The whole place, when they realised and noticed what had been done to them, there was glass and reflections everywhere. And when they discovered as they turned the pages that this had been on purpose, that this had been so they would catch sight of themselves, that it had been one big experiment. They'd go into their shopping centres and they would be seeing themselves walking from pane of glass to pane of glass with all the goods and the fashions behind the glass every single day. It wasn't mirrors, it was opaque. And when they found out that this had been done on purpose as an experiment, they were incredibly angry and they pulled them down and they smashed every pane of glass. And slowly but surely, the grey started to lift and the colour started to return. They were able to loosen up and stand up straight and take in the air again. And as they smiled at each other and their eyes began to twinkle, they found that their work was easier to manage. And as they found their strength, ironically, so did the king. Because somewhere deep down, even though he had lost himself and given up a long time ago, deep down, he secretly was thrilled because he was released from the bondage and the traps of those that had been pushing him around and controlling him. And he knew that his sons would be taken care of because the people had woken up once again and the lion was no more in slumber. And the lion, although not native to their kingdom and didn't actually live there, had become a symbol of a gateway from Egypt and Africa and more far exotic places. A gateway that had been protecting the unicorns and the spirit and the soul and the heartbeat of the most wondrous kingdom on earth. Every beginning has many, many different ends.